Hi everybody, welcome to the Dave's World YouTube channel. What I wanted to do with this opening footage was basically get everybody up to speed on Project CRUZE Missile. I've been working on this car for about a year and a half now, and you can see here that I developed parts for this car that you could pick up through davescustomparts.com. This is me showing everybody how to install my intercooler kit, and this footage was taken from that video, which there will be links to all the videos in the description. I also developed a big brake kit for the car that utilizes some high carbon rotors and some 4-piston calipers. The kit that's on my car would be considered like a race braking system. I also developed another style that's more of a street use, which you can see right here. Uses the rotor that would be in the middle with the slightly larger caliper to the left, and I was also comparing the stock Chevy Cruze brakes to my kit. I also show everybody how to build more power by modifying the what we would call the blow-off valve or the diverter valve. This specific part is called an HPRV, and what this does is help you hold more boost on your turbo. I also show the Dave's World wastegate modification. This is a Mamba wastegate that I have modified the spring to my preload to help produce more boost and get as much as you can out of the turbo. I show everybody how to modify the over-the-top performance shifter to get something a little more like it belongs in the car, a little bit nicer. And then I also have a catch can system that you can get on my website as well. So this is a custom designed system that makes it very easy to be able to drain the catch basin. And then you guys see that I've done some custom stuff to the car, like the spoiler and the custom exhaust tips. And then what we're gonna do in this video is get it on the dyno so we can see what kind of horsepower all the modifications I've made up to this point. And then we're gonna see what kind of power the car makes after we put the big turbo in. Welcome to Dave's World, everybody. So if you're clicking on this video, it's probably because you're a Cruze fan. And if you watch any of my other videos, you'll know that I'm a huge Cruze fan. And ironically, when I first bought this 2017 Cruze, I bought it because I was such a fan of the Generation 1 Cruze that I thought the Generation 2 would be amazing. And after I got it, I actually absolutely hated it. It got to the point where I was going to sell the car, and then I thought, you know what? Let me give the car another chance by making a bunch of modifications and see if I can just make it better. So, you know, I went down that road and I basically filmed everything from beginning to end. If you've been on my channel since day one, you know that I have a playlist on the channel called Project CRUZE Missile where you could actually see everything I've done on this car. So what I decided to do was I brought the car to a dyno. I really wanted to see what kind of power the car had. So these are the results. I have the folder backwards because the company that I went to did not want any social media or any kind of like YouTube content on their shop specifically. Originally, they weren't even going to let me go. What I had to do is basically promise that any footage where you could see their name, I would blur it out. I won't show on the dyno results. I'm going to basically black out all of their information, and I can't show you the cover of the folder because it has their information on it, but I have the dyno results. Now, what was the reason for me going to the dyno? Basically, up until this point, a lot of the modifications done to this car are what I would call the typical modifications. So these cars have from the factory anywhere from 100 to 125 horsepower to the wheels. I give a range because based on whatever dyno you go to, you're going to get a different result. You can take one car to 5 different dynos and you'll pretty much get different numbers on every one. So there's a range involved. From the factory, they have about 150 horsepower to the crank, or right at 150 at the crank. And then when the power gets to the wheels, you have what's known as drivetrain loss. So at the wheels, you'll have anywhere from you'll have about a 20% loss, and you'll be in that range of like 100 to 125 horsepower. So basically, the modifications done to this car are, horsepower-wise, the Dave's World intercooler. It's the whole system from the throttle body up to the turbo. I have a Mamba Tech wastegate on my car, but it's set up my way with my preload. The car's getting about peak 25 to 27 pounds of boost. It has a cold air intake by K&N. I believe that's the K&N intake. Yeah, it's the K&N intake and a tune. So what I was curious about is, with my custom modifications and my intercooler, what kind of power would I see at the wheels Then what I want to do is we're going to be putting this larger turbo in. I want to see what kind of horsepower we have now, based on what the typical modifications would be for this car. And then I want to do like larger modifications. So the next step after would be putting this turbo in. So after we put the turbo in, I'm going to bring the car back and see what kind of a gain we have over this last dyno run to what the large turbo gives us. Because I found online that there's not really a lot of information out there, like real world numbers. Everyone always talks about what their scanner says the car's horsepower is, or what the tuner thinks the horsepower might be, but there's no actual real numbers out there. So I was pretty excited when I got the dyno results. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys footage of, I want to show you the intercooler's temperatures before and after the runs. I basically wanted to verify the intercooler is actually working, so I took temperatures right at my intercooler. I didn't want to go through the scanner because the scanner takes like an average of outside temperature, engine temperature, and sort of gives you like a range. I wanted actual temperatures. So a lot of my temperature readings are literally at the intercooler itself to see what it's physically doing, which is really what you should be doing if you race cars or you're just really curious to see what it's doing, or curious to see what an intercooler does. So I'll show you guys footage of before and after with the intercooler. I'm going to show you guys footage of the actual dyno runs. I wasn't allowed to be in the dyno room because the shop had a lot of rules. Like I said, they wouldn't even let me originally go there unless I promised. I had to make a lot of promises in order to even get the footage. So I'm gonna show you the runs. I couldn't get footage of the actual like live dyno numbers because I wasn't allowed to be in the dyno room. Let me start with the footage of the intercooler before and after. Then I'll have Shelby let us know what's going on next. You guys should know who Shelby is. She was in one of my other videos. I thought that was kind of fun. She's my digital assistant, and she'll explain what the next thing will be at the shop, and then when we come back, we'll talk about some dyno numbers.
All right, 46 degrees.
How's it going?
All right, they just finished doing some dyno pulls with the car, and I want to check what my intercooler is doing temperature-wise. It's actually at 38 degrees. That's awesome. Okay, intercooler is working, and the car's making some pretty good power.
All right, so I'm gonna sit here with a permanent marker and literally I have to black out. I probably could have did this off camera, but I have to black out pretty much everything I promised I would black out. You know what? I probably should block out my license plate. Yeah, let's do that too. Okay. All right, so we have the date, we have the dyno numbers. We have the dyno that we used. I don't see any of their information. Okay, all right, so again, I couldn't get footage of the actual screen at the shop. It was sort of a pain in the butt to really film everything, but I was able to get footage of CRUZE Missile on the dyno. I thought that was more, I thought you guys cared more about seeing something cool like a CRUZE on a really nice dyno than actually like me running around the shop with the camera in my face like every other YouTuber would do when they're at a dyno day. I'm not that YouTuber who's trying to add fluff to his videos. I really just keep things straight to the point. I mean, you guys know how I am. So, all right, so here we are. These are the dyno numbers. What I'm gonna do is I'll put the sheet in front of the camera so you guys can see it. Hopefully it shows up on camera well. So I was actually really surprised to see how much torque this car produces. So we are at peak 246 foot-pounds of torque, and the peak horsepower numbers were 195 horsepower, right in this range. Being a turbo car, you're always going to have sort of a spike in power, but I was really surprised, or actually it makes sense now why the car went from feeling sluggish to feeling a lot faster after doing a tune. Is it's giving you a lot of power up front. And then running my intercooler system, we ended up getting two things. We ended up getting what's known as torque fill. So the horsepower numbers are usually spikes on these cars. So with torque fill, what's happening is that's why we're getting more linear numbers. The colder temperatures because of the intercooler and the better flow is helping basically stretch the horsepower out, which is fantastic. Now, what I'm going to be doing is we're going to be installing that larger turbo. And what I want to see is I want to see basically this spike in torque, but I want to see, I don't even care if we go above the 250 horsepower range. I'm sorry, 250 foot-pounds of torque and 200 horsepower range. What I want to see out of horsepower is I'd like to see more power up front, and obviously I want to see as high numbers as possible, but I want to see the torque curve higher and more across, or maybe have this curve rise a little bit. Maybe our starting horsepower might be 165 and our curve will be much higher into the 250s, but I want a longer curve because it'll give me more horsepower within the RPM range. And then what I want to see out of torque is I don't even care if the torque is higher. I just want to see this curve more linear. So instead of it falling off in the high RPMs, I want to see the torque curve more linear like the horsepower. And this is really what's going to make the car feel a lot faster. So basically, I'm happy with the numbers. I mean, the car's a 1.4 liter. I'm not really going to set the world on fire with the horsepower the car's making. In fact, from the factory, like I said, we were only getting to the wheels probably 100 to 125 horsepower. So to see 195 horsepower with all the modifications I've done, I'm happy with that. I mean, I don't know what kind of power you can really squeeze out of factory parts without making any major changes. I feel like at 195 that that's probably the max on factory parts. I don't think you're going to be able to do anything better other than throwing like nitrous or methanol injection on the car. So the next step's going to be, we're going to do the turbo. We're going to go back, see what kind of power numbers we have. I'm probably going to have to do some data logging and some tuning before that. Even though I do have a tune file for this turbo, I want to make sure it's 100% before I go. I'm going to do a lot more intercooler testing. I'm actually going to be doing a race intercooler. I have a bunch of people who are running my intercooler, but some people also want in-your-face big intercoolers on the car. So I'm making one. So there's going to be a video while I'm doing the turbo. I'm going to be developing like what I would call like a big mouth intercooler system as well, which can integrate into the current system. So if you have my intercooler system or my intercooler piping and you want to go with my large like race intercooler, you'll be able to use all that stuff. It's more of a module. It'll literally be a modular system. You'll be able to just hook it right in, and that's that. The difference will be how it's mounted, really. So yeah, I want to take this car to the next steps. Now, I don't know what the next step should be. So I guess maybe if I go back to the dyno and I see anything over 250 horsepower, and I would imagine, let's say close to 300 foot-pounds of torque to the wheels, I think that's a win. I'd like to see higher. I have no idea what we're going to get, which is why I'm doing this dyno video. That's why I decided to take the time to do this for the Cruise community. I actually was not going to put this car on the dyno. I've had my Corvette on the dyno probably 10 times since I've owned it. That car had to go on the dyno. It's got 700 horsepower, and I made a lot of changes to get to that point. And it's on the edge too. I have some pretty hot intake temperatures, and even with methanol, this thing on a hot day, it's useless. You know, so I have a lot of cooling upgrades that I'm doing to that car, and a bunch of different modifications I'm making to really cool down the temperature, which is why I'm so adamant about, you know, messing with this car's cooling system, because even though we're playing with like 300, maybe 400 horsepower in the future, that's a lot for a 1.4 liter. The Corvette's a 6 liter engine. 700 horsepower on a 6 liter engine, and 300 or 400 horsepower on a 1.4, they're both on the ragged edge for the size of engine that we have. So you have to really think about cooling and longevity, and that's how I do everything. I'm not the guy that's going to take a Sawzall, cut a hole in their bumper just to get cooling. I'm the guy who's going to figure out a way to get cooling and horsepower, and also have my car be able to start and drive every day without any problems, which is why I design things the way I do. So I got the dyno day done for the Cruise community so I can give you guys a gift. I appreciate all the support you give me, which is why I literally spent the money for literally it was no reason to go to the dyno. Who cares what kind of power I have? I love the car now. I'm doing the big turbo. Really, I wasn't even going to do the big turbo, but I've talked to a lot of people about that. That's kind of what they want me to do with Cruise Missile. So I have fans who want to see this car get to the next level. So thanks to you guys giving me input, I bought the turbo. But what I plan on doing after I get this turbo on the car is I want to run this thing to the max as well. I want to avoid doing pistons and connecting rods and stuff in this car because getting parts has been a nightmare. Even things as simple as finding clutch linkages for this car was a nightmare. But if I have to get to those horsepower numbers by pulling the engine, I'll do it. But what I want to do is I want to maximize everything I can before I rip into this engine internally. So if there's stuff I can do without having to pull the engine, I'm going to do it that way first. So why try and fix what's not broken? If the pistons and connector rods are holding up and I can get 300 to 400 horsepower out of this engine without having to tear into the engine, that's obviously the route I'm going to go, and I'm sure that's what you guys would do. In the future, if I have to go to the next level, I will. I know I've been thinking about doing a limited slip differential in this car. For those of you that don't know, basically most modern economy cars are technically one-wheel drive. What happens is the power goes down on one wheel, and then based on the undulations in the road or traction, it sort of switches between wheels. When you put in like a limited slip differential, both wheels do the work. It doesn't increase your horsepower, but what it does is increase traction and basically horsepower stability. You could technically get more horsepower to the wheels, because one of the things I was thinking of doing was doing a higher gear ratio on the differential. So that would actually increase your horsepower numbers. So that's a future project that I'm sort of going back and forth on what I want to do with it. Luckily, this transmission shares a lot of parts with the Generation 1 Cruise, so I'm finding some stuff that might work, and in the future that might be another project. So I feel like I'm talking a lot and I really don't have to, but really it's the only way I get to talk to my Cruise community. I love talking to you guys. You guys are very supportive. You know, as you know, I work on a bunch of different vehicles, and I've had some friends' cars here and stuff like that, and I kind of deal with each community directly. And some of the communities suck, and some of the communities are amazing. And I do have to say, my favorite community is the Cruise community. You guys are awesome, and I appreciate you supporting me, because without you supporting me, I never, ever, ever, ever would have gone down the road of really seeing what I could do with this car, because it was going to get sold about a year ago. I couldn't stand the thing, and I'm kind of glad that you guys gave me support early on, which is why I decided to keep the car and just make it better. And now I'm at a point where the car is great. I don't want to get rid of it. In fact, I'm making a payment on it, and I was at the point where I hated making the payments because I really didn't like the car. Now I'm happily making those payments, which goes a long way. And if you're wondering how much money I spent on the car, without the intercooler and without the wastegate, let's talk horsepower numbers with money. This is under, I want to say, $1,500 worth of modifications, and we're at 195 wheel horsepower with 246 foot-pounds of torque. So I'd say that's money well spent. I don't know what kind of car where you can spend 1,500 bucks and get a 25% increase in horsepower. If you can spend $1,500 and make a car fun and enjoyable, and that makes you take a monthly payment from being a hindrance because you hate a vehicle to, oh my God, I love this car, I'm never getting rid of it, I think that $1,500 is well spent and quite worth it. So I have no problem doing that, because I know everything can be made better, and why not? Like, why not spend the money? If you could spend that little bit of money and make something 1,000 times better, why not? Because then you'll enjoy your vehicle, and I'm all about vehicle enjoyment. David Patterson, that dude in blue, he always says miles per gallon, and he's right. I don't want to just say miles per gallon. I want to give him credit, because he's somebody I looked up to. He's been on YouTube for like 12 years, and I've been watching his videos since, I don't even know, like since before my kids were born. So miles per gallon is definitely where it's at. So, okay, I'm talking a lot. I just, I love being on camera. I love sharing with you guys. But have a nice day. If you ever need anything, feel free to ask. I have different memberships, different contact information out there. You guys are great at finding me and talking to me directly. I love that. And yeah, have a nice day, everyone.